Hi, welcome to my new unit on trigonometry 2 in pre-calculus. In this unit I will be looking at the graphs of tan, cot, secant and cosecant and the inverse of the trig functions, solving trig equations, doing more difficult identities, adding and subtracting angles for the trig functions, double and half angles for the trig functions. So these are some of the topics I'm going to be dealing with in this unit. And to start this off, the first video that I'm going to do is review the sine and the cos graphs. And this review is based on the unit that I've done already in trig 1. And it's called sinusoidal functions. So if you haven't looked over trig 1 on sinusoidal functions, I recommend that you do, because everything I'm going to do is based on the sine and the cos graphs. Here we go. Recall. The sine graph is, let's look at the sine graph. We have a circle, and this is a unit circle whose radius is 1. So this point right here at 0, this point x is 1, y is 0. Right here x is 0, y is 1. And right here x is negative 1, y is 0. And right here x is 0 and y is negative 1. So that's 0, 90, 180, 270, 360. And we're looking at the sine. So the sine is related. When I think of sine, I think of opposite over hypotenuse. I think of the y. Sine is the y on the unit circle as we wrap around it. And in relation to the degrees, 0 degrees, the sine is 0. 90 degrees, the sine is 1. And 180 degrees, the sine is 0. 270 degrees, the sine is negative 1. Back to 360, the sine is 0. And this keeps going around and around. It's related to the trig. So if you went, let's say, 360, then you went to, say, 450, you would get a 1. If you went to 540, you get a 0, so on. Now let's look at the graph of this. At 0 degrees, we get a 0. At 90 degrees, we have a 1. At 180 degrees, we have a 0. 270 degrees, we have a negative 1. At 360 degrees, we have a 0. So again, if you 270 degrees, we have a negative 1, 180 or 0, so 270 right here. So this is the graph, and this is the graph that we've done from 0 to 360. So that's the sine. Notice the sine graph is a sideways S. Now let's look at the cos graph. The cos is associated with the x, because the cos in the right triangle is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And if you think about drawing a diagram, or sorry, a triangle here with a right angle on the x-axis, then this is the x, this is the radius, this is the y. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse, and because the hypotenuse is 1, then sine on the unit circle is the y, and on the same diagram, right triangle, again we got an x and a y, and the hypotenuse of 1. So the cos of this angle theta, cos is adjacent over the hypotenuse, so that's the x over 1, which is the x. And let's go back up here, and the sine of this angle theta, this is the rotation from here to here. The sine of theta is opposite over hypotenuse, so that's the y over 1, which is the y. So sine is associated with the y, cos is associated with the x. And again, to rotate around the circle, we have a 1, 0, 0, 1. We have negative 1, 0, and we have 0, negative 1. So, and I keep drawing this circle all the time because I can go back to basics. So 0 for cos is 1, 90 is 0, 180 for cos, which is the x, which is negative 1, 270, cos is the x, which is 0, and 360 back to 1. So we start off at 0 is a 1, 0 is a 1 right here, 90 is a 0, 90 gives me a 0, 180 gives me a negative 1, which is right here, 270 gives me a 0, 360 gives me a 1. And so this is the graph. And I think of, again, a sideways C. So that's the cos graph. So let's look at, if we wish, let's have a look at the graphing calculator. And so we have, and I have the window made up to be convenient. So I have the sine here, and I'm going to hit enter, and you see the sine graph. So this is 0, this is the 90 at 1, this is 180 at 0, this is 270 negative 1, this is 360 gives me a 0. So what I'm going to do now is change that graph to a cos graph. So here we go, let's graph the cos. So here's the cos looking like, again, 0 is a 1, 90 is a 0, 180 is negative 1, 270 is 0, 360 is a 1 again. So you can see that it's imperative that you know these graphs, sine and cos, because they will derive the graphs of tan, cot, secant, and cosecant. And to do more on that, and this is, now I've gone from a negative 360 to a 360. So this is the sine is the y. So I remember the sine is 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. Now we got a 0 here, so we go to negative 90. It's negative 1, 0, 1, 0. So because this is a sinusoidal function is harmonic, and it repeats itself. So notice you came from 1 down to 0, you go down to negative 1, you go up to 0, you go up to 1, and back to 0, and this keeps going on. If you want, it keeps going on. It's harmonic, so it keeps going on. And the amplitude is the height, so the height of this one is 1. The period, to make one sideways S, you go, to make an S, you will go to 360 degrees. And the degrees is related to 2 pi in radians. And where is sine theta 0? Sine theta is 0 at, and you can see that it's going to be negative 360, and it's negative 180, and at 0, and at 180, and 300, and it keeps going on and on and on. In other words, this is a 0 starting at 0. So we could, if you want, you could say 360 n, where n belongs to the integers. Or you could say 2 pi n, where n belongs to the integer if you want radians. And the sinusoidal axis is the axis that cuts through the middle. Sinusoidal axis is y equals 0, because the sinusoidal axis splits the curve into, notice it's 1 up and 1 down. So this is right in the middle, dividing the curve, upper and lower. And if we want to look at, let's see what graph I got here, but I got to change my window now. I got to go from negative 360. Now I have the window right, and let's look at clear and do the sine. Oh, move that over, sine, and let's graph and see. So notice it's repeating. There it is. And if I could expand this out to be a negative 1,000 to a positive 1,000, we just get more cycles. So this, again, this is one cycle between 0 and 360. And there's many of them, so that's why it's a period of 360. Okay. And again, we have let's look at where R is 1 for cos. The cos, I know what cos is. At 0, cos is 1. Then it goes to 0. Then it goes to negative 1. Then it goes to 0 and back to 1. And so there's the cos. I know what the fundamental cos is on the unit circle whose radius is 1. So I'm at 1. I go down to 0. I go down to negative 1. I go back up to 0. And then back up to 1 again. So you can see there's many of them. Many. And in a cos, the amplitude, the height of the wave above the sinusoidal axis is 1 on the unit circle. The period is 360 and radiance is 2 pi. And cos is 0 at negative 270, negative 90, and 90, and 270. So we have, we can say that's at 90, and we're adding on 180 each time. So we can go 180 in, where n belongs to the integers. So that gives us all of these. If you take the 90 and add on 180, or you take it and subtract 180, you will get all this is only some of them in this graph right here, but there's many of them. Or we can have 90 is pi over 2, 180 is pi, n, where n belongs to the integers, and we have it in radians. Because remember, 180 degrees in degrees is equivalent to pi in radians. And the sinusoidal axis is, again, y equals 0. So it's imperative that you know what the sine is doing, the sine graph, and the cos graph is on the unit circle. Imperative that you have this memorized and be able to draw it very quickly. Imperative to memorize, to know it. And again, this is just the first video on this unit. And if you like my video, click the like button, click the subscribe button. If you want to subscribe to my channel, visit my math website, www.mathfullyexplained.com, to find more information about me, my videos, and the content. That's the content on my YouTube channel called Math Fully Explained. Just one word. Thank you for viewing my video. Hope the video helped you. Bye-bye.